All right, I've done a lot of research for a long time, and I definitely could not wait to deliver this video. And it's about why the DNC should be compelled to drop Joe Biden as a candidate. He's only a presumptive nominee. He didn't get enough votes. Why he should either reopen the primary or choose somebody else to replace him. And the obvious choice is the Democratic choice. Well, let's start with this video. In this format, I'm going to show different videos from different independent, often self-identified progressive journalists that tell you the full story of what's going on that the corporate and mainstream media won't. And you find it here on Punk Rock Politics because I spend the time to follow these people, to watch these videos, do research. So I've been holding this in for like 3 or 4 weeks. So here we go. Without further ado, this is Sagar and Jetty of The Hill Rising, a great show with him and Crystal Ball. And it's Media Erases Never Biden movement.
Sagar, what's on your radar?
Well, one of the central missions of this show is to spotlight the glaring hole in corporate media coverage.
And, all right, I just restarted the video so the mouth matches up what he's saying, hopefully.
Sagar, what's on your radar?
Well, one of the central missions of this show is to spotlight the glaring hole in corporate media coverage of American politics and how the very power of these institutions themselves shape the decisions that everyday Americans make in their daily lives, often with straight-up misinformation. This dynamic was on full display in the Democratic primary, where the media was able to solidify Biden's support at a time of crisis and made stars of the likes of Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and Beto O'Rourke. Now that Biden is the nominee, they are committed entirely to helping him defeat Donald Trump, which luckily will only lower their trust in them even more deeply. But one of the more glaring areas of hypocrisy in the media's coverage this time around versus last time around is their complete blackout currently of the never Biden, or I guess more accurately described, Biden skeptical movement. Now, obviously, since a mission of this show is to put the populace up in dialogue with the populace right, I have become well acquainted with it. And the more acquainted with it I get, the more outrageous it is to me that it has not been a perspective that has not yet been shared one time. Yes, you heard me correctly. Not even one time, as far as I can tell, on a major cable news channel. The Never Biden or the Biden skeptical movement is being kept nearly entirely off the airwaves of CNN and MSNBC, who actually employ some of the chief Biden antagonists of the movement, like Joy Lockhart and, of course, Joy Reid. Now, compare this, if you will, to the treatment of Never Trump grifters in 2016. Irrelevant figures like Tom Nichols, Bill Kristol, Rick Wilson, George Conway, Steve Schmidt, many more who had zero influence in the Republican Party of 2016 got literal daily appearances on these networks so that they can impart wisdom like this.
He knows that this is, an administration defined by ignorance of the world. And so that's partly him playing to their base and playing to their audience, the credulous boomer Rube demo that backs Donald Trump, that wants to think that Donald Trump's a smart one, and y'all elitists are dumb.
You elitists with your geography and your maps and your spelling, even though my
math and your reading.
Yeah, you're reading, your geography, knowing other countries, sipping your latte.
All those lines on the map.
Only them elitists know where Ukraine is.
Wow. Just a short reminder of what these people actually think. Every one of their utterances, any hint of a lawmaker straying away, any column they write, any stupid letter that they got a bunch of their neocon friends to sign, was literally written up in the New York Times, endlessly discussed on MSNBC and CNN. And where Trump was elected, the networks didn't decide to hire pro-Trump voices. Instead, they decided to beef up their coverage to try and cast the Republican Party in those people's image. That's how you get an MSNBC with the likes of Nicole Wallace, Steve Schmidt, and Tom Nichols. Now, these people could not be less relevant to the politics of actual American citizens who vote. And yet, by the mere convenience of their beliefs, they are granted hundreds of millions of dollars worth of free airtime. Now look at our show. Look at Never Biden or Biden Skeptical Voices. Do you see a single interview with them, with somebody skeptical of Joe Biden? Do you see anyone who has qualms with his record? No, you don't see any of it, and you never will. Even during the Democratic primary, in terms of dissenting political voices, it was basically crystal at the very height of the campaign on CNN's New Day at the crack of dawn. Every other segment was chock full of pro-Pete, pro-Amy, pro-Biden spin that was completely disconnected from reality. The silencing of skeptical voices erases a movement that I may disagree with, but have come to know on this show. And what I know about this movement is it is real, and it is a force in American politics. And that the media's job is to explain to people what is actually going on, not what they wish was going on. But that is not going to happen. And worse, it's just going to get worse because the Biden skeptical or the Never Biden movement applies to everything. Yesterday, my friends over at the Washington Free Beacon tallied up the number of interviews Joe Biden has done, the number of questions that he's faced since Tara Reade's allegation against him has come to light. 3 weeks, 10 interviews, 81 questions, not one about Tara Reade. Yesterday, my former employers over at the Daily Caller, they reported Hunter Biden's name continues to show up on Chinese business documents, despite his lawyers saying in November that he would divest himself from a company, which once received $1 billion loan from the Chinese government. Not one other outlet has followed up on that story. Not a journalist has asked Biden about it. And I don't think I'm going to hold my breath waiting for it to happen. It is going to be like this throughout the whole campaign. They're going to gild Joe Biden, they'll insulate him, they'll protect him at all costs. And just like 2016, the American public is going to see through that and revolt. And I saw that, Crystal, because, I mean, look, we have Brianna Joy Gray on, Kyle Kulinski, very, influential figures in their own right on the left, making pretty clear principled cases, saying, I come at this from a matter of principles. This is how I look at the race. This is how I say. Are they on cable? Are you on cable talking about this? No, because it's one of those things that it's not that they don't understand, because I think they understand it quite clearly. With the Never Trump people, they were ready to bring him on. Anytime one of them wrote some stupid letter, how many CNN segments? Oh my God, this person is calling out Trump, and this stuff was played endlessly on loop. And now those people got TV contracts, book deals. They're some of the most famous people, quote unquote, on cable news. They're looked at as go-to guests. And yet, where is a single person who is skeptical of Biden from the left? Not one person that I can see. I mean, Alexandra Rojas, who we had on our show yesterday, Justice Democrat, she is a CNN contributor, right? Where? What? Where's the second?
I don't want to talk to her anymore.
I'm waiting. Why do I have to interview your employee in order to get the news?
By the way, we're happy to interview Alexandra every day, but
I will take that any day. It's just ridiculous.
It's actually a dynamic that I hadn't thought that much about, so I'm so glad you pointed it out. But it's totally true, and it's a perfect example of the kind of wish casting that the news media does. They wanted these few Never Trump Republicans to be representative of a broader underlying movement. And they weren't.
Yes.
They wanted it to be. And none of the polling backed it up. They were just wishing for it. They were hoping for it. They were looking at the poll numbers and trying to manipulate it to fit their reality. Well, maybe Republicans are so lockstep with Donald Trump because the ones who weren't have already defected to the Democratic Party. I mean, there was all kinds of wish casting going on. And these people became very famous. They wrote books. They made lots of money. They became contributors. They got primetime shows. I mean, this became a whole thing. Even though it represents like 5 people and they all have cable news contracts.
The only people they represent are each other. That's all.
It's so true.
It's like a circular movement where
and here's the thing: if they did interview me or Kyle or Brianna or anybody who's like looking at this and not even saying, I mean, Kyle is saying he will definitely not vote for Biden, but I'm not even saying I definitely won't vote for Biden. I'm just saying, look, you got to convince me, and I'm not there yet. I mean, is that an outrageous view to say I'm undecided? Is that like an outrageous view to hold in America? But yes, it wouldn't be an outrageous view if I was a moderate who was on the fence. What do I do? I'm a centrist. I'm a corporatist. That would be an accepted, in fact, a sort of esteemed view to hold. That would be very reasonable. But because my principles are on the left, that becomes an outrageous, unacceptable view to hold outside of the mainstream that can't even be brought into the light. And if it is brought into the light, it's in a way that's completely caricatured, where you're totally villainized, you're totally smeared, you're called like a right-wing plant or a Trumpist or whatever, when nothing could be further from the truth, right? The reality is we hold a view, at least I'm speaking for myself, people have different views, out there who are listening, but look, I have a set of principles that are important to me. Joe Biden does not reflect them. That's the bottom line. Number 2, There is a reason why we got Donald Trump for president. It's because we had decades of people like Joe Biden running the Democratic Party. So when I look at this and go, and the solution to that is more of the same, I'm sorry, but that's a hard sell.
It's a hard sell. And again, that case is not yet reflected in our media. And guess what? What does the polling show? 15% of people who supported Bernie Sanders are going to vote for Donald Trump. Some of them are going to stay at home. Some of them are still undecided. Don't you think it's worth highlighting that dynamic at play on the cable news airwaves, especially MSNBC, the purported network of the left? But no, they don't do that. And it was the same thing. I mean, remember all the gaslighting on MSNBC about, the Maginot Line, and also some of the most ridiculous claims that you'd ever seen. It's just all set up right now into a protect Biden. I mean, I laid that out in terms of the Tara Reade allegation. 81 questions that he has faced in 10 interviews in the 3 weeks that this has happened. By the way, that number should be way higher for a Democratic nominee, but anyway. He hasn't faced a single question about it. 81 questions. That Hunter Biden story. I mean, there are a lot of people in New York. They got Beijing bureaus. They got a lot of good sources, and they, like I said, these are the people who can tell you line by line the itemized whatever's expenses of Trump Tower's Moscow deal. Okay? And they don't have any intellectual curiosity whatsoever but a $1 billion deal between Hunter Biden and the Chinese government. They're hypocrites. I'm sorry. It's blatant cover-up of what you see in story selection. As we said, I've said it here so many times. What they choose to show you is not as important as what they choose not to show you.
They've come to see their job as protecting the Democratic establishment on the one hand and destroying Trump on the other hand. Like, that's actually how they see their job. And so if you have a set of facts that are inconvenient, if you have a storyline that's inconvenient to those two goals, protect the Democratic establishment, hurt Trump, then they just ignore it. They just ignore it. And I don't know if they actually have intellectually realized that that's the job they're doing now, but any semblance of like, we're just journalists and we're here to ask the questions and let the public decide and weigh it down, and if there's an allegation that's uncomfortable, like, we got to dig into that, that's all gone. It is just about protect the Democratic establishment.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Let's see how that works out for him, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we'll have more rising for you after that.
All right, great video. I just want to repeat the line that Crystal Ball said. And, God, what was the line? If your narrative, whether true or not, falls outside the prescription for MSNBC and CNN to A, protect Biden, and B, hurt Trump, then they don't talk about you. They don't cover it. Or they deny it, or they lie about it. I'm adding that part of what I just said. All right.
Do you want a better America? Are you all ready for a political revolution?
People are standing up for justice. That is what this campaign is about.
Democracy has been stolen from us.
The entire establishment came against Bernie.
The mainstream media isn't owned by the people. It's owned by rich people.
Even as Sanders did better and better in the polls, there's always sort of a new counter-narrative that was meant to sort of take him down.
We're always told that CNN and MSNBC are the anti-Trump channels. They're also the anti-Bernie channels.
One thing that we learned in this campaign is how powerful mainstream media still really is.
A little bit of an intro.
Here's a great older video of Bernie building on the last advertisement for the upcoming documentary about the Bernie blackout, or called the Bernie blackout. Now, this is an older video from the 2016 campaign. Listen to this. And don't worry, we're going to get really into why Biden needs to drop out, what the problems are, and who should replace him.
You started off this interview using Donald Trump as a point of contrast. His popularity at this point is inarguable. How he is becoming popular has become a source of a lot of argument and criticism. The most recent volley, what he said about Hillary Clinton's break during the debate, what he said about how he characterized her loss to Barack Obama. You know, you're a guy who grew up in Brooklyn. You probably know the word that he used, maybe never heard it used as a verb before. But why is it working so well for him?
Well, Chris, you're going to have to ask the media precisely why. I mean, Trump was a smart guy. He's a media guy. He ran, he did a TV show. I'll give you one example, all right? A recent study showed that on ABC, Evening News, Trump, over a period of time, got 81 minutes of time. Bernie Sanders got 20 seconds. Now, you tell me why. And I think it has to do with the fact that Trump is very smart. He knows that media is not so interested in the serious issues facing this country. They love, bombastic remarks. They love silly remarks. If he says that somebody is sweating, oh my God, that is a major story, and all that silly business, the personal attacks, that kind of works. So I think this is more of an indictment of the media, actually, than it is of Trump.
I think Bernie Sanders is right about the corporate/mainstream media. Go to Punk Rock Politics. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, Punk Rock Politics, the video you're watching right now. And make sure you don't miss any new videos. And go to patreon.com/punkrockpolitics for early access, extra content. And depending on what tier member you become, an insane amount of perks. More than anybody that does a channel like this offers. And the first tier for extra access and additional videos and content starts at just $1 a month. So support Punk Rock Politics today so I can grow this, do better media stuff, and have the the articles and the videos pop up on the screen without having to use the TV and all that other great stuff, so I can keep doing all the homework that takes so much time to give you the information that you deserve, that the mainstream media and corporate media are not giving to you. All right, let's check this out.
All right, Crystal, what's on your radar?
Well, this crisis has revealed many, many things about our nation and about our ruling class. Some positive, the way we care for each other, how incredibly dependent we are on the service workers who are normally honestly treated as invisible or even worse. The everyday heroic actions of those who are on the front lines in our communities. We've also learned plenty that's negative, how our government is set up first and foremost to cater to financial elites, the callousness of those who would profiteer off of hardship, the fragility of a system that has long ago outsourced critical goods and functions in the name of GDP growth at the behest of multinational corporations. It's revealed the utter destruction that can be wrought by an incompetently managed government and an impulsive and erratic president. But here in my home state of Virginia, it's also right now revealing how a crisis can be used to justify pushing off pro-worker policies that establishment Dems and Republicans have to be dragged kicking and screaming to in the first place. Allow me to explain. So I've covered previously on this show how Virginia embodies the future of the Democratic Party as it shifts away from the working class into becoming a party fully centered around the professional managerial class. As you likely know, Virginia has swung in a short period of time from a red state to a purple state to really a blue state today. That tremendous shift in political gravity occurred as the Nova suburbs exploded along with their attraction to the Democratic Party. Now, off the strength of that affluent suburban support, Democrats have a trifecta in Virginia, meaning control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion. As Nate Cohn explained in a recent deep dive on national polling in the Joe Biden era, the Democratic Party nationally has continued to move towards consolidating the suburbs with their college-educated white-collar professionals while still bleeding white working-class support. Even with Biden's vaunted middle-class Joe persona, he is on pace right now to perform even worse with the white working class in 2020 than Hillary Clinton did back in 2016. And while the black and brown working class remain in the Democratic Party tent, it's primarily on the basis of a cultural appeal and the strong push factor of a blatantly racist and unwelcoming GOP. In other words, if Joe Biden becomes president, it will be with the very same coalition and affinities as the Democratic Party in Virginia. As such, Virginia offers a dire warning for those of us who care about workers' rights and dignity. Now, this may come as a surprise to you. It actually did to me. But Oxfam ranked all 50 states in the District of Columbia on workers' issues. Do you know where Virginia fell? Dead last. Virginia is 51st out of a possible 51. lowest possible minimum wage, no collective bargaining for employees, so-called right to work, and on and on and on. Now, I previously covered on this show how Dems, after campaigning on significant advancements in these areas in Virginia, ultimately at the behest of their corporate donors decided to focus their political capital on things like passing the ERA and dealing with Confederate monuments, rather than really fighting for the economic interests of working people. Cultural and tokenist issues ruled the day. But at least, after tremendous efforts from a few hero lawmakers, unions, and their allies, some small but significant wins were in fact achieved for workers. At least until this past week. Citing the crisis as an excuse, Governor Ralph Northam of blackface infamy is trying to push off even the modest minimum wage increase and advancements in collective bargaining rights until next year. Of course, if you push them off once, how hard would it be just to push them off again? As an activist coalition of unions put it, it is easier to postpone a freedom than it is to take one away. Remember, unlimited corporate contributions are permitted in Virginia, and you can bet that all their corporate masters will be filling their campaign coffers and burning up their phone lines to make damn sure that Virginia stays 51st in the nation in workers' rights. Let me just say this one more time to make it totally clear. Virginia is run 100% by Democrats, and it remains dead last in the nation for issues of concern to working people. Absolutely shameful. At the same time, the New York Times is lauding the state for its massive progressive shift, citing new gun laws, LGBT protections, marijuana decriminalization, and a provision allowing counties to remove Confederate monuments. Now look, those are progressive issues, don't get me wrong. But it is a cruel joke to call any administration progressive that would allow its workers to continue to suffer under worst in the nation conditions. And if that's an insult, it is an absolute outrage to use a crisis which has demolished the working class to justify postponing even the modest reforms that might make life slightly better, slightly easier. Why do they prioritize certain progressive issue sets over others? Well, just so happens that the cultural issue priorities of Virginia Dems happen to pose no threat to the profitability of the rich people and corporations that brought them into power. The status quo economic order will be maintained, including all of its racial disparities, but will allow you to remove white supremacist monuments. You're welcome. And of course, that the New York Times is perfectly oblivious to this massive class betrayal tells you everything about their ideological lens and that of the subscriber base that they cater to. I think it also helps to explain the does not compute disconnect between the Sanders left and the neoliberal establishment. They're like, look, you're going to get some progressive stuff. And we're like, yeah, but you're going to sell into corporations and working people are still going to get totally screwed Virginia suburban style. The Virginia Democratic Party is the National Democratic Party now. And look, maybe Ryan Grimm is right that a Biden admin can be pressured into certain incrementalist pro-working class positions, just like the Virginia Dems agreed to a gradual moderate minimum wage increase. But every moment, they'll be looking for an excuse to make life pretty for their corporate masters, and the affluent suburbanites whose interests are catered to will still get to call themselves progressives. In fact, they won't even notice the way ordinary people are getting screwed as the paper of record lauds the Biden admin's incredible progressive accomplishments, gaslighting the entire nation. And just like in Virginia, rather than using this crisis to fundamentally rebalance the economy towards workers, they'll instead use it as an excuse, just like the House and Senate just did, to give away the store to the big guys. But they'll slap a diversity initiative on top of it, and we'll be the jerks for not fawning over their great progressive accomplishments. As already, you know, I've been following this closely. For one thing, I've been involved in Virginia politics for a long time. But the disconnect between what they are doing or what they really are not doing for workers versus the sort of cultural issues that, yes, they feel comfortable pushing and are at the vanguard of is so blatant. And that I thought the New York Times thing was really interesting, too, that they're like, oh, they're so progressive now with this massive blind spot around economic populist interests of the working class.
It's perfect. I mean, it's a perfect encapsulation of what we talk about on the show, and it really does show the logical end of what a Biden presidency is going to look like. And, you know, like I said, I respect Ryan, but for all of the talk there, you see that Ralph Northam and had combined control of the entire state. They can pass whatever they want, but they refuse to pass the stuff that is an actual threat to the donors that they have. And when they do that, part of the issue is that they put cultural tokenist issues in order to feed their suburban base and monetary base in Northern Virginia over any of the actual working class people that support them. And that is just a recipe for letting those people leave the coalition. I mean, it is a very easy way to lose. And maybe not in Virginia. Maybe there are actually enough suburban people out there. Yeah, I think there are. And that's probably the story of that state, and that's to the detriment of the working people that live there. But if you take that and it's a national story, it's a big problem, because that was also the story of the Obama administration. Token executive orders, token action, token speeches, token receptions, and all of that. No actual action. And that's how Donald Trump becomes president of the United States.
Look, it may work politically as just like a political strategy to win. As Texas becomes more suburban, as Arizona, as some of these other states shift, and places like Wisconsin and Michigan shift in the other directions, it may ultimately work out for Democrats. I don't know. We have to do the math. We have to see how these things trend. What I care about, though, is that it's an absolute disaster for the working class, the multiracial working class of America, to have the party of the people, rather than centering itself around working class economics and priorities, to center itself around the interests and needs of affluent, mostly white, by the way, suburbanites. This was the real innovation of the Clinton era, right? This was an intentional realignment around the rising, affluent, white-collar professional. And it works so well for them because those interests are very much aligned with the interests of the big corporate donors that fund their campaigns. And this is where Virginia is so instructive, too, because it's very out in the open. Virginia, you can take unlimited corporate contracts. It's like the Wild West. You can take however much money you want to. It's all there out in the open. And so even as you have Democrats take over the governor's mansion, the House, and the Senate, still ultimately, who do they serve? I mean, Virginia's minimum wage is the bare minimum, $7.25. Activists wanted to push it to $15. They didn't get that, but they did get a gradual, moderate increase. And now, even that, the Democratic governor is pushing off, citing the crisis. I mean, that's what's so outrageous to me, is in this crisis, you should be saying, you know what, we're going to go to $15 an hour today. I mean, it should be the exact opposite. What can we do for working class people today? But instead, they'll use the crisis as an excuse to push off reforms that benefit working class people. It says absolutely everything, and it's mirrored in what we see unfold in Washington today, and I guarantee you it will also be mirrored in the potential Joe Biden administration. And look, I think Ryan is right and he's wrong. Look, he's realistic that it is unlikely Joe Biden is going to run some super progressive administration. And it will be incumbent on progressives to push him for even incremental changes that you possibly can get. It was successful in Virginia in that they were able to push on certain issues, but never imagine that these people are actually ever going to be your allies. They will not do anything without you absolutely forcing it, because it goes against their corporate and financial interests and their ideology, frankly. And every step of the way, they'll be looking for excuses to turn the clock back. That's the reality.
This is what we can extrapolate onto what we talked about on the show. Whenever people are like, oh, but the Biden administration did these 6 task forces with the Bernie campaign. Well, as you said, the activist base in Virginia, they got them to agree to this gradual increase in the minimum wage. But then, come crisis, they're like, yeah, that's not going to happen anymore.
Right.
That's what happens, is when you get paid lip service and you don't get something ironclad and actually passed with definitive measures through a Congress or through a legislature, it's nothing. It might as well exist in an ether at the whims of who the chief executive is. And that's why it matters who the chief executive is. Because if they're a corporate person beholden to suburban voters and to corporations, those are always the people. Right now is the crunch. Right now, the crunch, he serves the people that put him into office or that he is politically beholden to. That's how it's always going to be. All of politics is all about who is that person beholden to, who will they act for in a time of crisis, who will they act for whenever they want to expend their political capital. This is what a Biden administration is going to look like. There is just no question.
Yeah.
And in terms of pushing on things and all of that, that's why I'm just so deeply skeptical, because I watched the Obama administration, just like you. They did the same thing. They got reelected twice. They paid a lot of lip service to a lot of causes. Almost none of it ended up happening.
Especially because of the way Joe Biden won. How did he win this primary?
Yes.
He won this primary by telling the left, basically, screw you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think, in his view, he doesn't need the left. He doesn't have to respond. The whole Democratic ideology over decades is about, they have a belief that the more you tell your activist base, like, to piss off, the more successful you're going to be electorally. That is the view. That is the view of Joe Biden as well. So yeah, he may pay some lip service to task force or whatever. I mean, the fact that you've gotten zero commitments on anything at this point tells you everything you need to know. Because nobody in the Democratic establishment moves left after they've already won the primary, especially when they won the primary without any progressives supporting them.
And I took note of this. What was the entire Bernie Sanders campaign all about? There was a lot of stuff. It was actually about Medicare for all. If you really look at it, what was the actual support? Number one reason, the core of it was healthcare. Are any of those task forces on healthcare? No. Then not one. He already said he would veto it. Like you said, you won the primary by saying no.
Yeah.
And that is how it became. So it's like, you really think that he's going to pay you? It's like, yeah, $15 minimum wage. I'll hold my breath to see if he pushes that through Congress. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, it's like your task force is on the stuff that nobody supported Bernie Sanders because of a task force. I don't know.
On education.
On education. I'm sorry. They just did it. Yeah. Some people supported him for the student debt thing. Biden already laid out in the sand. He's like, this is my means.
I don't know. Personally, I'm here for the task force.
Right.
That was always my goal and my dream.
When I was a young kid, I was like, I'm going to get involved for politics because of task force.
One day, maybe I'll sit on a task force.
I learned from Hillary Rep.
All right, Sagar. Looking forward to your radar. That's next.
Biden drop out. Workers of the world unite. Who the fuck is this joker? Oh, is that John Smith from Punk Rock Politics? All right, an older video. Let's check it out. Why should Biden drop out? Here's some more reasons.
Welcome to Moment of Clarity. As you can see, I'm coming to you from a hotel room in New York City this time around, but I needed to talk to you now because it's important. Couldn't wait for tomorrow. The exit poll shit is happening all over again, where you can see that the exit polls and the machine results are varying, meaning it is showing us fraud. It is showing us fraud in these primaries in one form or another. On Redacted Tonight, I already went through how the number of provisional ballots, number of polling places closed in these various states, Texas and California specifically, were specifically designed, sorry to use specifically twice, right back to back like that. I know that was probably very stressful for you. Anyway, I'll try not to use specifically the word anymore within this specific video. But in those two states, it showed immense suppression and various manipulation of the election in order to stop Bernie Sanders from winning those elections. Now we're seeing the difference between the exit polls and the machine results. So what I'm about to go through is coming to you from TDMS Research, which you can also look up for yourself online, tdmsresearch.com. Basically what they do is they take the exit polls and compare them to the machine results. What we're told is the actual vote in these states. As I mentioned before, there are very few exit polls. Basically, they got rid of most of the exit polls in order to make it more difficult for people like you and me to notice fraud in our primaries, in our general election, because exit polls are recognized worldwide as having legitimacy, as showing what should happen in an election if there's not fraud, okay? They're not some wild thing. They're done well. They're done accurately. In other countries, if they vary by 2%, just 2%, compared to the machine results, then people say it's fraudulent and we need a recount, if not an entirely new election. And even our own USAID, which is connected to our CIA, it's basically our pretend humanitarian way of creating coups around the world, even they say that 2% off for an exit poll points to fraud. And they've funded exit polls in various countries in order to show whether it was a legit election or not. So nowadays, there's really only one company left that does exit polling that is not connected to CNN or Fox News or something. They're called Edison Research. But as their own CEO said in a Washington Post article back in 2016, after they release the initial exit polls, they then alter their exit polls to fit the machine results, which is the opposite of an exit poll. That is a fucked up exit poll. Because if you're taking the unobservable, unaccountable machines and using it to connect, to change the exit polls, then you've taken the possibly fraudulent thing and wiped out the legitimate thing that's supposed to show the fraud. Anyway, when they initially show their exit polling, before they've altered them, before they've adjusted them for machine results, that is the number that TDMS Research grabs and compares it to the machine results. So they're grabbing it before it's been altered. At least that's the goal. And in a couple of states, in this last Super Tuesday, they were able to show that the exit polls are way off from the machine, the unobservable, unaccountable machine results. This is the same shit that happened in 2016. So let me go through a few of the numbers real quick. Let's begin with Massachusetts. The exit polls were very far off from the machine results in Massachusetts, which, as you remember, the polling coming out before Super Tuesday was saying, hey, Bernie Sanders is going to win this thing. Bernie Sanders is going to win Massachusetts. He's going to win Texas. He's going to win a lot of states, if not almost all of them. That's what the polling was showing. And then all of a sudden, there was this crazy shift that showed him losing all these states. Especially when you consider that Joe Biden had very little ground game, very little money, never appeared in Massachusetts. Then what the fuck happened? Well, here's what happened. When you add up the shift between Joe Biden's exit polls and his machine results and Bernie Sanders' exit polls and his machine results, you get 8.2%. That's the amount of shift. Double the 4% exit poll margin of error. Biden's exit polls showed that he got roughly 388,000 votes in Massachusetts. The machine results showed he got 448,500 votes in Massachusetts. A massive difference, a difference of over 60,000 votes. Bernie Sanders, if you go by what the exit polls were telling us, should have gotten 408,000 votes. You know, these are rough numbers, but they're close enough. And the computers showed that he got 358,000. A difference of negative 49,000 votes. He lost 49,000 votes in an election, Massachusetts, an election that only had 1,343,000 votes. So this is a huge shift. And if you add up the shift between Sanders and Warren, the amount they lost, it totals 97,000 votes less. And where did those votes go? Mainly to Biden and Bloomberg. So that was a shift of 8.2%. Now here's something interesting. If you look at what happened in 2016, when the exit polls were also off during the primary, how much were they off between Bernie Sanders and Clinton? 8%. Very similar to what we saw this time. Which would make sense if this is a similar amount of fraud, it could be fractional voting, who knows. But it makes sense that these exit polls would be off in a similar amount. So basically, tens of thousands of votes are being shifted from the outside candidate, the anti-establishment candidates, Sanders and to some degree Warren, and shifted to the establishment candidates, Biden and Bloomberg. According to the exit polls in Texas, Sanders and Biden were roughly tied. However, the unobservable, unaccountable machine results show that Biden won by roughly 4.5%. That's double the margin of error. And the discrepancies between Sanders and Bloomberg were 5.4%. Basically similar to Massachusetts, votes getting shifted from Sanders to Bloomberg and Biden, the two establishment candidates that were still running in Super Tuesday. So basically, if there were a legit election in Texas, it's fairly likely Bernie Sanders would have won or come very close to winning. If there were a legitimate election in Massachusetts, Bernie Sanders would have won. If there were a legitimate election in California, Bernie Sanders would have won by much more than he ended up winning by. Furthermore, Dallas County in Texas has asked for a recount after 10% of the vote was not counted. They found 44 thumb drives with votes on them afterwards, after they'd already reported this shit. Also, back in 2016, Clinton versus Sanders also had a difference between exit polls and machine results, a shift towards the establishment candidate. And here's the thing, if people want to say, well, it's just because, there are discrepancies, there's going to be shifts, who knows, things go wrong. Yeah, but these shifts always go in one direction. They always go towards the establishment. They always go towards the candidate that the corrupt DNC wants to win. And if you're one of these people that goes, well, TDSM research doesn't matter, these exit polls, they don't matter because they didn't count because they weren't adjusted with the machine results, which shouldn't happen really, but anyway, if you're one of these people who says exit polls don't matter, TDSMA says they got their head up their ass, even if you want to say all that, you should still be calling for legitimate elections. You should still be saying, fine, then here is the exit poll data, the raw exit poll data. Here is the open source code for these machines that we're supposed to trust. Here is all the information so that we can prove these are legitimate elections. But we don't see that, do we? We are not told that, are we? We are attacked. We are told these elections are fine, and don't ask any more questions about it. If someone told you, oh no, it's all fine, but I'm not going to show you how the fuck it works, I'm not going to show you what's going down, isn't that a little suspicious? Not to mention the DNC in court, their lawyers in court, in a lawsuit. And after the 2016 election, they said that the DNC has the right to rig the primary. It is their right to rig the primary, to put in the candidate they want. So, for all we know, that, yeah, these things may be rigged, but they're saying to themselves behind closed doors, well, it's our right to rig it, so why not? We want Biden in there, we don't want Bernie Sanders, we want the corporate candidate, why not rig it? For all we know, that is their stance, and they're fine with that stance. So, fucking become transparent about it. Show it to us. Show us the open source of the machines. Show us the open audit of the machines. Show us the open raw data of the exit polls before they're adjusted to fit the machines. Show us all of that, and we will not complain anymore. How does that sound? Instead, we're doing it all over again. This is fucking Groundhog Day. This is Edge of Tomorrow. This is Russian Doll, that Netflix show. Those are all of the movies and shows I can think of where they repeat the same day over and over again. This is exactly what we're doing. We're doing 2016 all over again. Yeah, sure, they replaced Hillary Clinton with Biden. All right, great. But we're doing the same shit. We're allowing it to be rigged, and we're watching them, and they're fucking laughing at us. I'll have more on this on Redacted tonight. I'll also have more detailed, longer explanation on my podcast, Common Censored. You can find that for free wherever you get your podcasts. If you think it's important, please share it, get it out there. Let people know that we gotta stand up for legitimate elections, because if we don't have that, what the fuck do we have? All right, keep fighting.
Absolutely keep fighting. And just to end it out, this video, we demand for legitimate elections. We demand transparency in our elections, whether it's the DNC, the RNC, our local, county, state, and national elections. We demand transparency and accountability.
Really, it's about the broad patterns. Everyone's focusing on this quote-unquote official complaint, and I'm sure to say that if we found it, it would be big news. But just because it might not be...
Sorry, that was a mistake. So I'm just going to, play the video, and hopefully the thing sinks in. If not, I'll fix it very quickly.
There's only one place a complaint of this kind could be: the National Archives. I am requesting that the Secretary of State...
Sorry about the glitch. We're going to play this video right now. It should all sync up. And then after we see this, don't forget that Joe Biden is the presumptive nominee, being presumed, but he hasn't gained enough delegates to be the outright nominee, and Bernie Sanders has the next amount of votes. And here's another story from good old Joe Biden. That was one of the first to cover this story. There was only 8 videos, somebody told me in one of my comments on the video, of when they searched Tara Reade, Joe Biden's sexual assault accuser. I was one of the first 8 out of 5 billion users on YouTube to make a video about it. And I got it from Jimmy Dore. Here we go.
Only one place a complaint of this kind could be: the National Archives. I am requesting that the Secretary of State the Senate ask the archives to identify any record of the complaint she alleges she filed. If there was any such complaint, the record will be there.
So what you just heard there was a clip of Joe Biden and Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe earlier this morning on MSNBC. And there, Mika Brzezinski is outlining...
Sorry for the delay. I'm just going to hit it real quick. It should line up now.
Joe Biden's position, which is that if there's a complaint lodged by Tara Reade, it would be in the National Archives, and it wouldn't be in his personal Senate papers located at the University of Delaware. And you guys know that I made a video on this broad interview earlier this morning. And in general, I'm pretty happy with that video. But this is something that I missed and that I think a lot of us missed at first glance. That somebody actually went and asked the archives if they would have this file, and it turns out they wouldn't. If you go on Twitter right now, Nicole Einbinder, she's a reporter, says the following, quote, Joe Biden said that Tara Reade's complaint could only be at the National Archives, at what was then called the Office of Fair Employment Practices. But a National Archives spokesperson told me that they do not hold records from that office. Instead, a Senate Historical Office staffer said the Fair Employment Practices records are governed by a Senate resolution mandating that, quote, records containing personal privacy, information closed by statute, and records of executive nominations are closed for 50 years. That staffer said that rules for filing a complaint to the Office of Fair Employment Practices were complicated, and that it was possible that a staffer attempting to do so without proper guidance may not have taken the necessary steps to get an investigation started. According to congressional testimony from 1995, 479 people contacted the office between 1992 and 1995 seeking assistance. Of those, only 102 entered the office's 5-step dispute resolution process, which included a formal complaint and hearing. If Reade's complaint was filed to the Office of Fair Employment Practices, the record will remain closed until 2043, more than 2 decades from now. And the reason I read all of that out, word for word, was because it underlines that Joe Biden is misleading you. At best case, Joe Biden himself was mistaken, but I really do think he's trying to distract people from his own personal papers, to suggest that if there's any documentation, it's with the National Archives, when the National Archives itself says that we don't have such papers, and insofar as they might exist, they won't be available until 2043. And so, Joe Biden is trying to pull the wool over your eyes, my eyes, everybody's eyes, by making it about one piece of paper, when really it's about the broad patterns. Everyone's focusing on this quote-unquote official complaint, and I'm sure to say that if we found it, it would be big news. But just because it might not be there doesn't mean the story goes away. Tara Reade might have launched a complaint, and as that tweet chain notes, it might not have been formally archived. Tara Reade might have launched a complaint, and the paper might actually be in the Delaware office because Joe Biden is lying to us. Tara Reade might have launched a complaint, a piece of paper was created, and lo and behold, it was destroyed by somebody trying to protect Joe Biden. All of these things are possible. None of those things are guaranteed to have happened, but they're all possible, and I think we have to keep that in mind. There is a drive right now to basically say that if we can't find this one piece of paper, this one formal complaint, then Tara Reade is lying and Joe Biden is innocent, when I can think of nothing further from the truth. If there's an official complaint, that's bad for Biden, but I don't believe it's bad for Tara Reade if there isn't, given what we know. And it underlines again why the University of Delaware papers for Joe Biden are so important, because those are papers most directly connected to Joe Biden. And as Nicole Einbinder notes Tara Reade saying, it's not just about the formal complaint. Tara Reid says there were various meetings about this. There were various meetings about vacation days and interpersonal office issues, and those could well be found within the Biden papers. It's not just about one particular document or one particular formal complaint or one particular formal procedure. It's about anything that can contextualize Tara Reid's credibility. And the best place to find that stuff is in the papers at the University of Delaware, not at the National Archives like Joe Biden is saying. So, Joe Biden lied to us, or Joe Biden